people in life enjoy a bit of unpredictability, right? It spices up your life a little bit. It puts a little bit of novelty in there, and it just makes you enjoy the randomness of what life is. But similarly, people like what is dependable, what is predictable, right? You show up on time for work. Your boss likes that. Your business likes that. You complete projects when you say you will. And a neat trick actually is giving a longer window and then finishing the project even before that. It's a little business tip for you guys. But streamers use this trick of dependability, right? I will be on stream from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. You can expect me here. If you want to tune in, maybe you want to catch me before you go to your job, or maybe you want to catch me after you end your shift, I'll be here. And so that's the same thing with a lot of Twitch streamers. It's the fact that you can depend on someone to be there, and that's a convenient factor, right? And that's all that it is. In fact, when you boil it down, is that it then becomes this convenience factor for other people to then depend upon, your dependability, your predictability, right? So, one instance in which I think any racing driver worth their salt will say the worst driving conditions possible on when you're trying to race, in fact, isn't in the wet. It's not in even snow. It's not any of that. It's a mixture of wet and dry conditions, because when you're racing, you don't really have a whole lot of time to pay attention into what patches are wet, what patches are dry. And also, you have sort of a familiarity that you gain through going through the course or through the toge or whatnot, to where you know your traction levels at all times, whether that be in the full-on rain or when it's just completely dry, obviously. So that is the most deadly mixture, in fact, and a lot of races don't actually happen if it is a mixture of wet and dry at the same time, because it's just so dangerous. For instance, one story, I was on a toge over in Washington. It was like an up and downhill or whatnot, and it had been wet previously, and so I'm racing against some other guy, and we're at this downhill portion, and so it was wet, but there was the kind of unpredictability that was thrown in there that I had never thought of before, which was that there were leaves on the ground. And if you've ever driven on wet leaves, it's like driving on ice. And so I'm going downhill now, and this STI, way better brakes than me, all-wheel drive, everything. He takes the corner quite great, and then I slam on my brakes, or at least I appropriately slam on my brakes, but didn't account for both the wet leaves and also my front tires were not in great condition. And so I slid into the guardrail about 5 miles per hour or so. I had to get a new bumper. I know how to replace my own bumper, obviously, and it costed me like $50, but it was a lesson, right? That you need to have predictable conditions, or at least expect those conditions, in order to drive at your fullest extent and your maximum capacity, right? And not to go over that as such, and to keep your car in good condition, right? If I would have had better tires, I probably wouldn't have actually hit the guardrail. So point being is that people love predictability, at least, to a certain extent. For instance, pro players, Golden Glue, for instance, or Pobelter, you know exactly what you're going to get out of them. That's why you pick up a player like that. So it's actually on you if you expect more from these players, right? And I think this is also a large reason as to why they never got much flame anyways in their entire careers. That, Golden Glue's going to do what he does, and it's kind of on your fault if you expect to place, over and into the fucking finals or the semifinals or whatnot. So that's entirely on you. Now, to get into Blaber has been raised to be unpredictable. In fact, even to his own teammates and coaching staff, he's been raised to be unpredictable. And this extends back all the way to Reaper's style of coaching as well too. And so he's like this chaos puzzle, to where you just throw him in there and you hope that his unpredictability will destabilize the game in your favor, at least. So in that regard, you also have to lie in your own fucking bed if he ends up shitting the bed, in fact, right? Because you already instilled that type of culture. And this doesn't just lay on Blaber's hands, right? It's that if you want unpredictability from your teammate, at the very least, make it to where you know him better than the opponent, right? That's what it is to be a teammate anyways, is that you know that person better than anyone else outside the team. You know exactly how he plays, his play style, what he's going to go for, the moves that he's going to do, the invades that he's going to challenge, the scuttle crabs that he's going to contest. So it's like I said before in another video, instilling confidence in your teammates is incredibly important. People love confidence, which also is tangentially to predictability, because it says to the other person, I'm confident in this, which means that I know the outcome and how to handle the situation. Everything is just under control. Like, why do you think women are so attracted to confidence? It's security, dependability, predictability. It's so predictability is a very large factor, especially when it's in consideration of your teammates or just the people around you. For instance, racing requires you to get a special license, right? When you're on a racetrack. Famously, the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America, requires that you go through a driving school in order to get your racing license to where you can compete in competitions or just race on any SCCA sanctioned event. But the reason why that's important is because they need to know that your driving style is predictable enough to where if you're on the racetrack, that you aren't going to cause an accident, right? You aren't going to brake way before you should on a corner to where you slam on your brakes before the entry, way before, and then so the car behind you, they aren't expecting that. They're expecting you to be somewhat competent enough to at least kind of go in the area where you're supposed to brake. But now, if you're braking way before, you're going to cause an accident, right? So I remember an interview that I did with Max Waldo about Fudge. And he had said this line of to where it's nice to work with Fudge because we don't have to, say all the bullshit, right? Of things that we should already know. We kind of understand the fundamental basics and we just don't need to talk about that, right? Like we can kind of speak on a telepathic level when it comes to those types of things. And that's exactly what it is to be a teammate. In fact, it is to be somewhat on a telepathic level, that you don't have to talk about the little small bullshit and you can just get to the nitty gritty of the entire situation. You don't have to waste time, right? That's what good synergy actually is. So just as much as it is, I think, Blaber's fault that he plays so brazen, and I think a lot of people acknowledge that he plays so brazen, especially against better opponents, it's also his teammates' fault and coaches, which allowed this type of mentality to even fester to begin with. And also misunderstand Blaber on a more fundamental level. It doesn't matter how he's playing now, right, at this tournament or at MSI. You have to deal with it and slowly fix it, which you should have already been doing, throughout the split anyway. So it is your fault at the end of the fucking day. And this is the exact same shit that happened with Svenskeren on TSM when he was, of course, invading and, Bjergsen wasn't able to go with him, or Bjergsen didn't want to go with him. And so there was this miscommunication between the two. And it's like, well, yeah, but you actually allowed him to do that throughout the entire season. And then so he gets punished on the world stage. But that's also your fault too. You instilled that habit and you knew that that shit wasn't going to work against better competition anyways. So why would you instill such habits if it's very predictable, in fact, that it's going to happen against better opponents and it's going to get punished? So when I said before that you want a jungler that's a bit unpredictable, a bit psychopathic, right? Obviously in the gameplay sense, not in the literal like mental prognostic sense, but it only works if you yourself know how this unpredictable character truly works on a fundamental and teammate basis.